Welcome to Game Changers for Government Contractors. Game Changers is dedicated to helping you position for and win more government contracts. And now your hosts, Josh and Mike.
Welcome to the show. My name is Michael Lejeune, and I will be your host today on Game Changers. As a quick reminder, this episode of Game Changers is sponsored by Federal Access. Federal Access makes beating your competition easier. It can improve your proposal win rate by 42%. It comes with a no BS guide to winning government contracts, and it puts a subject matter expert on speed dial for you. And that's literally the tip of the iceberg for Federal Access. If you want to learn more about Federal Access, go to rsmfederal.com/FA. I want to get started today here by welcoming our guest, Joshua Frank. Josh is the founder and managing partner of RSM Federal. He's also my business partner in here. And he was just out last week at the SAME JETSI conference. So welcome back, Josh, into the real world of the business here. So
Thanks, Mike. It's good to be back.
Yeah. I know it's like you need a vacation from the vacation, and you went on a trip and then on vacation and then we're back. So it's a little bit interesting. But today you have a great topic that I think everybody is going to love. It's one of those that, especially if you're a small business, you're really going to like this. In fact, this is what you were speaking at the SAME JETSI conference last week in Phoenix. This is what you were speaking about. And it was about getting more value out of your socioeconomic status. And as you say in the presentation, hint, hint, it's not what you think it is. So Josh, you and I have talked extensively about this and about the challenges that small businesses face in government contracting. But for some reason, we see a lot of them struggle with their certification. Number one, just how to get it and what they need to do. And some of them that don't even know what certifications they need to have. And then the other piece of that is using it properly. So I often see those challenges in there. I mean, would you agree that's kind of where a lot of them struggle with their status?
Yeah, it's interesting. The two core challenges, as you identified, how do you certify? And more important, and something I hope we'll have time to get into today is, do you do it yourself? Do you pay someone to do it? How do you find the people? What are the timelines, et cetera? So, that whole certification, getting certified. And then, yes, the second part, knowing how to use your status, because it isn't what you think. Most people think they get a status, and it's sort of equivalent to a GSA schedule. You think you have it, and now money's going to fall off the tree, or it's a lot easier.
Right.
And the unfortunate part is that's not necessarily true. There's still a lot of effort and work that has to go into it. And yes, the reason we're having this podcast today is because a lot of companies don't properly position their status.
Yeah, I think it's more of a mindset issue than anything, where they, again, like you said, they think that, hey, I've got this status, so that equals money, that equals contracts, and that's just not the case. So, in your opinion, what is one of the main reasons why companies with a status, and when we say with a status, maybe you can actually, before you answer my question, answer this question: what are some of the main statuses that are out there? And then the second part is why do they fail to win contracts?
Okay, so yep, all right. So from a basic, let's lay a foundation here. The core statuses, and most people think there's just maybe a half a dozen statuses, but and especially for our Federal Access members, everybody in our FA community. Through FPDS that, there's like 100 different statuses.
Yeah, there's
yes.
all kinds.
I mean, a bunch are Native American, Alaskan, ANC. But, the core ones, when we think socioeconomic status, first and foremost, don't forget small business. Just being small business is a status. A lot of people think, well, you've got to be 8A or woman owned. No, the reality is the government has a 23% requirement for small. But the core ones are 8A for minority, hub zone for, disadvantaged actual areas within the city, veteran owned and service disabled veteran owned, and then you got woman owned, right? Mm-hmm. And so those are the core statuses. And just as an FYI for our listeners that may not understand what those mean, just like the government has a 23% requirement for small, there's a 5% requirement for 8A and woman, and a 3% requirement for SDVOSB, service disabled, and hub zone, right? The core challenge that many small businesses face is that they focus on their status. They position their status. Everything is status. Their status is real big on their business card. The status is, front and center on the website. It's on the capability statement. And oh, by the way, this is what everybody's told to do, right?
Right.
Everybody, whether it's not all, but many of the PTACs, a lot of the small business offices, a lot of the small business experts, a lot of other consultants and advisors, mentors, coaches, etc. Front and center, the government's got a requirement for it. And what we try to tell our members, our FA members, is, you don't win a contract because of your status. You're not going to win a contract. In fact, I'll go as far as to say you're not going to win a sole source contract if you're 8A. Right?
There's a lot of people that wouldn't agree with that. They would think, no, this status is all you need to win that.
Well, but here's the thing, and this is the way that I often describe it. Your status is a differentiator. Right. That's it.
Right.
For example, is the government, is a federal agency, is an armed service, is the Army, the Navy, what have you, will the intelligence community, will any of these organizations award you a contract if you're not competent?
No,
of course not.
Or they shouldn't. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, it's like, if a company gets a sole source, either from a product perspective, nobody else sells that product. There's a niche, they're a sole supplier, manufacturer, what have you. From a service perspective, you've either done something where they can't change vendors, or you do something nobody else does. But at the end of the day, 99.999, whatever it is, percent of companies don't get sole source contracts. So you're not, if you're not competent, you're not going to win a contract regardless of what status you have.
And you shouldn't.
Agreed. Absolutely. One of the other things, though, that I want to throw out there is for the companies that are listening today. You're thinking and you're saying to yourself, okay, my status doesn't give me the ability to win. Then how am I supposed to use it? And what we often tell our clients and our members, focus on your value. Focus on your value. And let me give you an example of what I mean by that. You need to be mapping your competencies in order to identify qualifiable and quantifiable metrics, right? That's percentages and numbers and ROI in order to communicate that your company is better than the next company. And oh, by the way, you have these statuses. Your statuses are just an added value. That is the primary, if we were to sum up today, what is the primary challenge that small businesses face, especially those that have status, is that they don't softly communicate their status. The status should never be up front. It should never be the first thing I see on your website. It should not be the first thing I see on your business card. It should not be the first thing I see in your proposal. The first thing I see should be, wow, look at these metrics. Look at the value that this company provides. They're already a head above their competition. And then, oh, look at that. Look at the statuses that they have.
Oh, and that's they happen to be.
Yeah,
status,
that's
right.
Yeah, that's the core challenge that most companies have.
Yeah, and so what I'm hearing from you is the reason that most companies fail to win a contract is they focus on their status, and who they are in their mind is their status, not the value they provide, when in reality, who they are is the value they provide and why they should communicate that. So if I'm to win a contract, I've got to get really good at communicating value.
Yeah, and let me throw something on top of that. I don't have metrics. I don't have metrics for all of the statuses, okay? But getting certified and using your certification is really no different than getting a GSA schedule and using your schedule. A year ago there were 22,000 companies that had GSA schedules, and there's all these just like there's a ton of companies that send emails, right? Our listeners, they probably receive 2 or 3 emails a week from companies that all they do is certifications, right? Gee, we help companies do certifications. You also get 2 to 3 emails every week from companies that go, hey, we can get you a GSA schedule, and we'll provide all this marketing support, blah, blah, blah. Well, just remember this, and this is something that most, I guess, coaches, advisors, consultants in the market, especially those that do schedule services or certification services, what they don't tell you is of the 22,000 schedules that companies had last year, 48% of those companies failed to use them. Mike, that's 10,000 companies.
Massive.
It's massive. And people go, well, hold on, 48%, 10,000 out of 22? How could that many not be successful? And Mike, the answer is the schedule does not help you win contracts. It does in some respect. It's a differentiator. It gives you access to a contract vehicle. But if you're not properly communicating the value of what you sell, your schedule is not going to do you any good.
Right.
So I bring that as an analogy for certifications.
Right.
Your certification's not going to do you a lot of good unless you understand how to communicate your value.
Right. And that's a great point. I just spoke to somebody last week who wanted a GSA schedule, and for the first time ever with me in this business, one of the first things the guy said is, am I right that just having the GSA schedule won't get me business? I've still got to do all the marketing and all that other stuff I normally do.
Right.
And I was like, oh my, he gets it. He gets it. I was so excited because that was the first time that's happened. And just to grasp the mindset, again, I'm using that word today, the mindset of just having those things doesn't do it. Just having a website doesn't get you business. Just having a business card doesn't get you business. Like, you've got to use this stuff, but you got to know how to use it properly, and that's a really big deal. So, we're talking a lot about value here. What is the process, or is there a process that listeners can follow to, more strongly position their value? How would you tell them? Because I think that's really the center of the problem for a lot of folks is number one, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, which I'm not communicating my value. And number two, even if I did know I was doing it wrong, I don't know how to properly communicate value. I don't know what's important to the potential customer for me to communicate. So how would you walk them through that?
So, all right, great questions. Let me start at the top. This process, the process of communicating the value of your company, it doesn't take an MBA, okay? It doesn't take a master's degree. It doesn't take higher education. It takes experience, right? You have to learn that first time how to do it. Once someone shows you how to do it, like for all of our members, right? The 1,000, whatever it is, companies that we work with, once you show it to them, they're up and running, right? You have to learn how to map your competencies, right? I said that before. You map your competencies in order to identify qualifiable, quantifiable metrics, i.e. your value. Mm-hmm. So, off the top, communicating your value, first, let me throw a shout out to all of our FA members. For all of you listening, within the digital library, there's an entire packet on how to do competency mapping and getting all these metrics that we're talking about, right? So, so, communicating value, that's one. Once you understand what your value is, I think the best way, Mike, to describe this is to give you an example, okay? And so most companies, let's just, as an example, we'll take a technology company, right? Most companies will start off, if I were to say to you, hey, Mike, what do you do? Most companies respond with, well, we're a woman-owned small business, or we're an 8A, or we're a small business, that provides IT services and specializing in database administration and network engineering, okay? That's how most companies introduce themselves. Now, if you introduce yourself that way verbally to me, 9 times out of 10, that's the homepage of your website.
Right.
That is exactly the opening paragraph on the cover page of your proposals. And by the way, this is market agnostic, right, Mike? This is not just government. This is commercial as well. This is just general business positioning and marketing. And so most companies go, we're a woman-owned small business that, does IT services specializing in, DBA, network engineering, what have you. And what I would say to our listeners is that's fine. That's true. That's exactly who you are. And you're like 1,000 other companies that do the exact same thing, say the exact same thing, and position it in the exact same way.
So you wind up in the stack of papers with 100 other companies that they can't even tell that are different, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And, as a perfect example, whether it's a teaming partner or whether it's a government, when you hand somebody your capability statement, the average time someone looks at it is 3 seconds. I'm not making this up. There's been studies on this. 3 seconds. In 3 seconds, I'm either going to see that you have a status, or I'm going to see that you provide value. Mm-hmm. Which one are you going to pick to look at further? Right? So, now our listeners are are probably saying at this point, okay, then what am I supposed to say if I'm not supposed to say the size of my company? I'm not supposed to say any of my status or exactly what I do. Right? Mm-hmm. The answer is, and this is an example. We'll follow the technology one that I just gave. You would say something along the lines of, we are in the business of streamlining, consolidating information and data across multiple geographically dispersed networks to increase visibility and accuracy and speed of access. Right, across the enterprise. And let's say on average, we save our clients 30% in operational expenses and more than 45% savings in, call it data integrity and database cleansing costs. And, we've provided these benefits to Monsanto, Blue Cross Blue Shield, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, et cetera, et cetera. Now, not once in that did I say that I was a woman-owned small business or an 8A or even a small business. I didn't say I was an IT company. I didn't say we did, what did I say, network engineering and database administration. No. You got that from, what I just walked through of, visibility and accuracy, speed of access, 30%. Savings here, 45% savings there. I replaced who we are, what we do in our status with value statements. And guess what? You can figure out what we do based on the type of value statements that I provided. That short exercise, if our listeners get anything out of this podcast today, it would be learn to communicate your value, quantifiable metrics, right? Instead of saying what you do and what your status is, because you're a lot more mature. You have differentiated much more strongly, right? And the government and your teaming partners are much more likely to want to work with you.
Yeah, I think that's really big, and again, if listeners are really hearing it today, understanding the value that you provide is so big. It's one of those things of actually being able to say, what benefit do my clients receive from purchasing this product or service? Not what product or service are they buying? What is the benefit they actually receive from using this, implementing it, whatever? And you mentioned competency mapping. I think that's the majority of the process there, right? Of going through and saying, okay, what is that we provide them in one column? So what is the actual thing, the service, the product, the whatever? And in the other column, saying as simple as what's the benefit to the client? They don't buy IT solutions because, hey, they need, they ran out of IT solutions. They buy IT solutions to fix some problems or to, gain something in their business. And being able to identify that is way more powerful because one more thing, and then I want you to jump in on this. The other thing is being able to differentiate is being able to communicate the value. They're the same thing. So if you can communicate the value, you can differentiate, which is when somebody submits, or when, companies submit 100 proposals around an opportunity, how do you stand out from 100 other people out there? And it's differentiating through value is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And do we have time for another story?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let me change industries for a minute, give you another example of how powerful competency mapping, and when I say competency mapping, it's understanding and capturing your past performance, right? And that's what, and I think most of our listeners are, they may hear competency mapping and go, well, I really don't understand. Yeah, what is that? It's simply taking your past performance and documenting it. And almost all of our listeners, if you've responded to a solicitation, you have done this in one shape or form. But let me change industries, give another example. One of our members is a staffing company, and they do everything. They do admin, they do technology, they do, you name it. They've got, folks, on board at a lot of the Fortune 500s and a lot of smaller companies. And we took them, we educated them on the whole competency mapping process. And it was pretty simple because they were obviously members of FA, so they had access to all the checklists and what questions do you ask, et cetera, et cetera. And they sent out a survey to all their employees and in this case, it was Express Scripts, right? Which is a Fortune 100, in fact. And one of the results came back, and I looked at one of the responses, and I said, get him on the phone right now. I drove from my office to the corporate headquarters in order to take this call. And I said, okay, first and foremost, if you're doing more than what's in your scope of what the agreement there is between your company and this Fortune, this client, don't worry about it. You're not going to get in trouble. Because Mike, a lot of folks, a lot of companies that have employees on site at a client location are actually afraid. Those employees are afraid to say, well, I'm doing something more than what I was hired to do. Right? And so they think they're going to get in trouble. Well, I asked a couple of questions and I said, so wait a minute. You're there on site to be doing, X, Y, Z. I think it was like database administration, but you're also a very senior software developer. Is that right? And he said, yes. And I said, and you've done something with their financial systems? And he said, yes, it was they asked me as a side project to work on it. By the end of that call, and that call took maybe 10 minutes, I finished it by saying, let me make sure I understand this. You're there to do database administration, but you have just developed the next generation account payable system for a Fortune 100 company? And he chuckled and he said, yes. The owner of our member, the owner, is sitting in the room with me. Her jaw is on the table.
She had no clue, right?
No clue whatsoever. And so, in addition to, the reason why I'm telling the story is from a recommendation standpoint, in addition to capturing the value in your past performance in order to communicate that value, don't assume that, if you have employees, this is, obviously service companies and non-product companies, don't assume that your employees are doing exactly what their scope is telling them to do. This can be construction, this can be electrical engineering, this can be technology, it's any industry. And so, I want you to imagine you are a small business like this member, this company, right? Our FA member I just walked through, and you don't really have what you think is a lot of strong past performance. Can you imagine being that owner and finding out that one of your employees has done something that you weren't being paid for them to do, but it's probably the most powerful past performance and metric
in the whole company
that you could have?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
I hope some of these concepts are drilling in, because it truly can help a company accelerate. And if you can't hear the passion in my voice when I'm talking about this, again, it really, truly can help a company accelerate.
Yeah, I think the way I usually describe it is, socioeconomic statuses are great, and they will help you get over the last 10 yards, make that last effort that you need. But it's not going to close the deal for you. It's all the communicating the value, the differentiating, all those types of things. And then bring the cherry on top with your status and say, oh, by the way, you get to check these 4 boxes. You get to meet your criteria. You get to do whatever if you can communicate the value clearly. So all good stuff, all really practical. We got about 30 seconds-ish. Any final thoughts for the listeners here?
No, I would say, for our FA members, if you have not yet started the process of competency mapping, if you haven't looked in the digital library in the members portal, absolutely make sure you get in there and take a look at it. It truly is. It's one of the most important documents that we have. And then for all of our listeners who are interested in selling to the government but just haven't pulled the trigger, or they have pulled the trigger, but they need help, I would take a look at FA. Take a look at Federal Access, because our members have done over it's up to 6 now, 1.6 billion in contracts in the last 4 years alone. So, but thanks for having me on, Mike. I appreciate it.
You are very welcome, as always. Thank you for being on, and this has been great. And I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us today on this episode. Remember, you can find every episode on iTunes. Just look for Game Changers for Government Contractors and subscribe to the feed to make sure you get every episode. You can also learn more about each of our guests by visiting the official Game Changers website at rsmfederal.com/Game Changers, where we'll have links to their websites, bios, and any special offers or things like that from them. And last but not least, please visit our sponsor for today's episode, the Federal Access Program. You can visit that at rsmfederal.com/FA for more information on how you can find and win more government contracts.
Thanks for listening to Game Changers for Government Contractors. For a full list of episodes and other resources, be sure and check us out on the web at www.rsmfederal.com/gamechangers.